Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're getting into the complex world of the Sicilian Mafia.
Right. We've pulled together quite a bit of material.
Yeah, sources looking at its origins, way back in the 19th century, how it's set up, what it actually does.
And its wider impact, yeah. The goal is really to pull out the key stuff, give you a clearer picture of what this is all about.
Exactly. We want to connect the dots, the history, the structure, the crimes, to understand how it works and why it's lasted so long.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The basics. It started in Sicily, Italy, 1800s, still around today.
Mainly in the west of Sicily, right? Like Palermo, Trapani.
Agrigento, yeah.
Yeah.
Those areas. But it goes by a few different names.
Not just mafia.
No, you hear Cosa Nostra a lot. Literally, our thing.
Our thing, okay.
Also the honored society. And members call themselves men of honor or men of respect.
Ooh, it says something about their self-image, I guess.
Definitely. And it's not small fry, even now. Maybe 5,500 members.
Wow. And the core business.
Protection racketeering is key. Selling security, basically. Plus, mediating disputes in the criminal world, setting up illicit deals.
And it's based around the family, or clan.
Yeah, family, clan, casca. Each one controls a territory. Could be a town, a neighborhood.
And these men of honor sell the protection.
Exactly. Protection, arbitration services. Okay, so let's unpack the word itself. Mafia. Where does that come from?
Yeah, it's a very loaded word.
It is. The Sicilian word is mafioso. Gives us mafioso.
Yeah.
Roughly, it means swagger.
Swagger. Like arrogance.
Sort of,
Oh,
but also
right.
boldness, bravado. Back in the 19th century, it was an ambiguous bully, arrogant, but also fearless, enterprising, proud for men.
And for women.
The female form, mafiosa, just meant beautiful or attractive.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
Oh, okay. Any other origins? You mentioned caves earlier.
Right, mafi. That's Sicilian for caves near Trapani and Marsala. Uses hideouts sometimes. Adds a bit of mystery.
And given Sicily's history, here, influence.
Definitely possibilities there. Could be from mafi, meaning exempted, linked to an old tax. Or mahia, aggressive boasting. Or marfih, rejected. Or even mafa, safety, protection.
Protection comes up again.
It does. And maybe even mafir, the name of an Arab tribe that ruled Palermo once. So lots of layers, potentially.
So the word itself is complex. When did it get pinned specifically to this criminal group?
Well, that's interesting, too. There was this play in 1863, I Mafiosi della Vicaria, the mafiosi of the Vicaria.
Right.
It showed a Palermo prison gang, very mafia-like. Had a boss, initiation, omerta, the silence code, even the pizzu, extortion money.
But it didn't use the actual word mafia.
No. The play was a hit, but didn't use mafia or mafiosi. But then right after, the term mafia starts showing up in official reports.
So the play maybe put the idea out there.
Seems likely. First official documented use, 1865, a report by a prefect, Filippo Antonio Gualterio.
Got it. Now, we often hear mafia thrown around for any organized crime, but Judge Falcone wasn't keen on that, was he?
No, not at all. Giovanni Falcone, who fought them so bravely, he really warned against using mafia generically.
Why was that?
He felt it blurred the lines. He said, yeah, there are similarities in methods, but the Sicilian Mafia has its own specific history, structure, social roots. Calling everything mafia misses those crucial differences.
It dilutes the meaning, like calling all tissues Kleenex.
Exactly. Now, about the real name, Cosa Nostra. That came from insiders, right? Turncoats.
Yeah, in the U.S. first.
Right. Joseph Valachi, 1963, American mafioso, testified they called their group Cosa Nostra, our thing.
Our thing.
The FBI and media often stuck la on the front, La Cosa Nostra, but in Italy, it's usually just Cosa Nostra.
And then confirmed in Sicily.
Yep, Tommaso Buscetta, the big informant, told Falcone in 1984, same term used in Sicily. Buscetta even said mafia was more like a literary label, something outsiders used.
Interesting. So not their preferred term internally.
Seems not. Other defectors backed this up. Antonino Calderone, Salvatore Contorno. They all said Cosa Nostra.
So if they met someone new in the group, they'd say they belonged to Cosa Nostra.
Or La Stessa Cosa.
Yeah.
The same thing. It was the signal.
And other names they used.
The honored society, as we mentioned. And always men of honor, men of respect. That's key to their identity.
Important point, though. Cosa Nostra is specifically the Sicilian Mafia and its U.S. offshoot, not the other Italian groups like 'Ndrangheta or Camorra.
Absolutely crucial distinction. They're separate organizations with their own histories and structures.
Okay, let's dig into how people have tried to define the Mafia's core function. Franchetti called it an industry of violence back in the 1870s.
And then Diego Gambetta much later called it a cartel of private protection firms.
What do those ideas tell us?
They get at something fundamental. Gambetta's idea of them being guarantors of trust, where the state is weak or distrusted. That's really insightful.
So it's not just random violence.
No, it's violence or the threat of it used strategically to settle disputes, enforce deals, mainly for people operating outside the law. They're selling a service in a way. Extra-legal governance.
Private protection. It explains why they've lasted, fulfilling that niche.
Exactly. They provide a form of criminal order where official order fails. They're not just thugs. It's a business model, almost.
And it's not one giant corporation, is it? More decentralized.
Definitely. Think of it less like a single company, more like, well, a cartel, as Gambetta said. Independent gangs or families operating under the Mafia brand.
And they claim the exclusive right to sell this protection in their area.
Right. That's the key. By calling themselves men of honor, mafiosi, they create a brand, control the market. They differentiate themselves from common criminals who can't offer the same kind of guarantee.
Okay, that paints a clearer picture. Let's rewind. How did this all start? What was happening in 19th century Sicily?
It was a time of huge upheaval. Sicily was moving away from feudalism towards capitalism and uniting with Italy. Big changes.
And the old system broke down.
Pretty much. Under feudalism, the nobles had their own private armies for enforcement. But feudalism ended, land got redistributed or sold.
So more landowners.
Way more landowners. And more businesses, which meant more disputes over property, contracts needing enforcement, stuff needing protection.
And the new Italian state couldn't cope.
Not effectively, especially out in the countryside. They were weak, lacked manpower, didn't understand local ways. Plus, banditry increased because of the economic chaos.
So a power vacuum.
Exactly. And into that vacuum stepped, well, local elites started hiring young guys into these companies at arms.
It's fight bandits.
Supposedly. Fight bandits, get back stolen stuff, often for a fee or even pardons for the thieves. And guess who was often in these companies?
Ex-criminals.
You got it. A kind of proto-mafia. Early private enforcement, often with links to the underworld.
And this took root more in Western Sicily. Why there specifically?
Good question. The land structure was different. Western Sicily had smaller estates, more absentee landlords. Eastern Sicily had bigger estates, often managed directly by the owners.
So more demand for outside protection in the West.
Exactly. One mafioso could protect several small properties, giving them independence, leverage to charge more, and they got involved early with things like citrus groves, cattle ranching stuff vulnerable to theft.
And they were better at getting stolen stuff back than the police.
Often, yes, especially cattle. That built their reputation, showed their value.
It's amazing how specific conditions created the opportunity. When did the authorities really notice this sect of thieves?
Pretty early. 1864, Niccolo Teresi Colonna, head of the Palermo National Guard, wrote about this sect, with connections everywhere, contempt for the law, code of silence.
And the government's reaction.
Often clumsy, sometimes brutal, might have even pushed people towards the mafia by alienating them. The official term mafia popped up in 1865. And we know they had initiation rituals by 1876, so they were getting organized.
And they got into politics quickly, too.
Very quickly, using muscle to get voters to back certain candidates.
Who would then owe them favors?
Protection, turning a blind eye, maybe help targeting rivals. In that fragmented political system, a local boss could swing a lot of weight.
There were reports later. San Giorgi's reports.
Hermano San Giorgi, yeah. 1898 to 1900. Detailed stuff. Identified hundreds of mafiosi and clans, described rituals, codes, crimes, counterfeiting, kidnapping, murder, intimidation, even mentioned funds for members in prison, lawyers.
They tried arresting them.
Big sweep in 1898 led to a trial in 1901, but mostly minor convictions, didn't really dismantle much.
So early efforts didn't work well. Now what about economic theories? Specific resources fueling their rise.
Yeah, some interesting studies there. One from 2015 links it to sulfur mining, the resource curse. Valuable stuff, easy to steal or extort from, weak state, perfect conditions for private protection.
Sulfur, okay. Any others?
Another in 2017 points to citrus fruits. Demand exploded when they found citrus prevents scurvy. Valuable crop, needed protection.
It makes sense.
And a 2019 study suggests a link to the rise of socialist peasant groups, the fasci. Landowners apparently turned to the mafia to push back against peasant demands because the state wasn't protecting their interests strongly enough.
So multiple economic drivers potentially feeding into it.
Okay.
Let's jump forward. Mussolini. The fascist era.
Hmm?
He went after the mafia hard.
Oh, yeah. Big campaign starting around 1925. He put Cesare Mori in charge in Palermo, gave him sweeping powers.
Why just law and order?
Partly, but also about asserting fascist control, boosting Mussolini's own image, and getting rid of potential political opponents, anyone linked to the mafia. There was supposedly an incident in 1924 where a mafia boss kind of disrespected him.
Ah, so he got personal too.
Could be. Mori used tough tactics. Mass arrests over 11,000 people by 1928. Took families hostage, seized property, tortured people for confessions.
Brutal. Did it work?
It definitely suppressed them. Murder rates in Sicily dropped sharply. Land rents went up, suggesting landlords felt safer. But the arrests often hit poor peasants harder than the big shots with connections.
So not entirely even-handed.
Not always. And while fascist propaganda claimed victory, declared the mafia dead by 1929, it wasn't permanent. They pushed it underground, damaged it, but didn't kill the roots.
So suppressed but not gone. What happened after fascism fell, after the Allies landed in 43? Did they just pop back up?
Pretty much. The chaos of the invasion, prisoners escaping, booming black market, it was fertile ground again.
And the Allies?
Ironically, the Allied military government actually appointed known mafiosi as mayors in some towns. People like Calogero Bazzini, Giuseppe Genco Russo.
Seriously? Why?
Maybe they saw them as anti-fascist or just figures of authority in the chaos, but it gave the mafia legitimacy a foothold. They reformed their clans, absorbed bandits.
And the focus shifted from rural to urban.
Yeah, the post-war economy changed things. Power shifted towards the cities. And they fought hard against land reforms for peasants, got violent, the Portella della Ginestra massacre. Some think the mafia was involved, maybe protecting landowner interests.
So adapting again. Then came the sack of Palermo and the big move into drugs. How did that happen?
Okay, so in the 50s, the U.S. cracked down on drugs, plus the Cuban Revolution messed up the American mafia's networks.
An opening for Sicily.
Exactly. Joseph Bonanno, big American boss, came back to Sicily in 57, set up heroin deals with the Sicilian clans. He also helped create the Sicilian Mafia Commission.
To stop them fighting over the drug money.
Basically, yeah. Immediate disputes over the lucrative U.S. market. Meanwhile, Palermo was having this massive post-war building boom, public money flowing in.
And the mafia got involved.
Deeply. Guys like Vito Sancimino, Salvatore Lima, connected politicians, controlled the public works office. They gave permits to mafia companies, forced others to pay protection.
Leading to corruption and bad building.
Huge amounts of it. Unregulated construction, shoddy buildings, historic places torn down. They controlled the whole sector. Permits, construction, cement. Cement was a good way to launder money, too.
So land, then construction, then heroin. This sets the stage for the mafia wars, right? Very violent periods.
Extremely violent. The first mafia war was 62-63. Started over a drug shipment dispute, caused outrage, led to arrests. The commission was dissolved for a bit.
But they bounced back.
Oh, yeah. By the 70s, cigarette smuggling was big business, often with Neapolitan partners. Then, mid-70s, the French shut down heroin labs in Marseille.
So Sicily stepped in.
Cosa Nostra set up its own refineries in Sicily around 75. They wanted control of the whole chain refining distribution. Heroin addiction soared in North America. By the early 80s, Sicilians controlled maybe 80% of the heroin in the northeastern U.S., the pizza connection.
All that money must have caused tension.
Big time. Led to the Second Mafia War, early 80s. This was brutal. The Corleonese clan, led by Luciano Leggio, then Salvatore Rino, went for total domination.
The Corleonese.
From Corleone.
Right. They used bribery, manipulation, and just wiped out rivals. Hundreds killed. Rina became the top dog, the boss of bosses.
Things started killing officials, too.
Yeah, judges, prosecutors, journalists, police, anyone who got in their way. Serious questions arose about links to top politicians like Giulio Andreotti. This leads to the Maxi trial. Falcone and Borsellino, a turning point.
Absolutely massive. Falcone and Borsellino's investigations, plus crucial testimony from guys like Tommaso Buscetta. They built an unprecedented case.
Held in a special bunker court, right?
Yeah, for security.
Yeah.
475 defendants, ended with 338 convictions, upheld by the Supreme Court in 92. A huge blow to Cosa Nostra.
But the mafia hit back hard.
Horrifically. They killed judges, prosecutors, anti-mafia figures, politicians like Lima, who they felt hadn't protected them. And then Falcone assassinated, May 92, Borsellino, July 92, car bombs.
Unbelievable. The reaction must have been huge.
Massive public outrage. The government cracked down hard. Rino was arrested in January 93. More members started talking.
But the violence continued for a bit. bombings in '93.
Yeah, tourist spots. Florence, Milan, Rome. Seemed like a warning maybe to potential informants, maybe against tougher prison rules, the 41 bis regime. Some thought it was even a message to the Catholic Church to back off.
After Rina, Bernardo Provenzano took over. He changed tactics. The Pax Mafiosa.
He did. After a brief, violent stint by Leo Luca Vagarella, Provenzano took the reins and deliberately lowered the profile. Stopped the high-profile killings of state figures, informants' families.
Tried to rebuild loyalty.
Yeah, brought back the support fund for prisoners' families, tried to get informants to retract testimony. Under him, Cosa Nostra actually lost ground in the drug trade, mostly to the Ndrangheta.
And he preferred recruiting relatives.
Thought they'd be more loyal, less likely to turn. He stayed hidden for 43 years, arrested in 2006.
Amazing. And his successor, Matteo Messina Denaro, also caught recently.
Arrested in 2023, yeah. Another long-term fugitive.
So where does that leave the mafia today in Italy?
Well, the bosses in prison are still under strict controls, Article 41 Bs. There were those unconfirmed rumors about talks with Berlusconi's people in the 90s.
About softening anti-mafia laws.
Yeah, fur votes, never proven. More recently, the mafia capital thing in Rome showed them profiting from the migrant crisis.
So still involved in various rackets.
Oh, yeah. Arrests continue. Drugs, extortion, fraud, vote buying, controlling businesses like migrant centers, betting shops. Still links between Palermo and the Gambino family in New York.
But less violence. Fewer murders.
Significantly fewer murders connected to mafia activity compared to the 80s and 90s. But they're still there. A loose network, maybe 100 autonomous families, each controlling territory. The commissions exist, but no real central government.
Still decentralized. Let's look inside a clan, the structure.
It's hierarchical. You've got the boss, capofamilia or representante. Below him, an underboss, capobastone or sottocapo. Then one or more advisors, consigliere.
And the foot soldiers?
They're organized into groups, decina, supposedly 10 soldiers each, soldati, operai, picciati, led by a capodicina, though the numbers can vary.
And the boss? How do they get the job?
Usually elected by the soldiers. Interestingly, it's not always for life. Could be yearly elections, possibility of being kicked out. Bosses tend to keep close contact with their guys.
What about the underboss and consigliere?
Underboss is number 2, sometimes a relative. Consigliere is elected too, meant to be an impartial advisor, often handles finances.
And they use associates, people not actually members.
Lots of them. Corrupt officials, potential recruits, treated more like tools.
What about the boss of bosses, the capo di tutti capi? Is that real?
According to guys like Bucetta and historians like Lupo, no. It's not a formal position. People like Vizzini, Ruina, Provenzano were incredibly powerful, yes. The media loves the term. But it's not an official rank within Cosa Nostra itself. Doesn't fit the decentralized structure.
Good clarification. So who can join? What's the process?
It's exclusive. Only Sicilian men, no close relatives in the police force.
Age limits?
Not strictly. Could be as young as 16, apparently. But they test you rigorously. Obedience, secrecy, courage, ruthlessness, spying skills.
And the final test.
Almost always involves committing murder. That's the ultimate initiation. Binds you, proves loyalty, ensures silence.
Why would someone want to join?
For street criminals, it brings respect, power. Makes it easier to commit crimes, make deals, demand things. Access to the rackets, like protection.
Still strictly men only.
Traditionally, yes. Though there are recent reports of women taking over roles for imprisoned husbands or sons.
And they call them families, but they're not usually blood relatives.
Right. Usually not related. There are even rules against too much nepotism in the higher bodies, the commissions. But sons often follow fathers in, naturally. They know the life, the traditions.
Does having a normal job matter?
Doesn't affect your standing. Historically, many had basic jobs or none. But professionals, lawyers, doctors have numbers too.
Okay. And the commission we mentioned, it helps mediate disputes. How does it work?
Right. There's usually a commission for each province. Started in the 50s. Clans are grouped into districts, mandamenti. Each mandamento elects a head, capo mandamento, who sits on the provincial commission.
But it's not a government.
No, definitely not. It's a forum for consultation between the autonomous clans. Decisions ideally by consensus. Its power is deliberately limited. They don't want one boss getting too strong.
What's its main job then?
Regulating violence is key. You need permission to kill someone in another clan's territory or to kill important people. It also helps manage succession when a boss dies or retires to try and keep things stable. Might divide territory, appoint a temporary leader.
A way to keep internal wars somewhat in check. Let's talk rituals and codes. The initiation ceremony sounds intense.
Yeah, we have a few descriptions. Bernardino Vero, back in 1893, talked about a secret meeting, armed men, a skull and knife on the table, testing loyalty, pricking the lip, blood on the skull.
Grim. Any more recent accounts?
Giovanni Brusca described his in 1976 more like a banquet. Pistol, dagger, saint's image on the table, question about commitment, willingness to kill. Then they prick your finger, smear blood on the saint's picture, set it on fire.
While you take an oath.
Yeah, something like, if you betray Cosa Nostra, your flesh will burn like this saint. Pretty dramatic.
Definitely memorable.
That's the point. Specific, weird, painful, makes the new status undeniable, witnessed by senior guys, no written contracts, so the ritual is the bond.
And rules about introductions. You can't just walk up and say hi.
Absolutely not. Never introduce yourself directly to another mafioso you don't personally know, even if you know of him. You need a third person, someone trusted by both, to make the introduction. Vouch for both sides. They stick to that rigidly.
How do they address each other?
Equals might call each other compare, like comrade or godfather in a non-family sense. A bond. Inferiors call superiors padrino godfather, showing respect for rank.
Then there were those 10 commandments found in Lo Piccolo's place in 2007. What did they say?
Fascinating glimpse into their code. Stuff like, no self-introductions, don't mess with friends' wives, don't be seen with cops, avoid pubs, clubs, always be available for Cosa Nostra duty, even if your wife's giving birth.
Wow.
Respect appointments, meaning ranks. Respect wives, tell the truth to other members, don't steal money from others or other families.
And who can't join?
Anyone with close relatives in the police, anyone with a two-timing relative, anyone who behaves badly by their standards, lacks moral values.
Their specific moral values.
Exactly. Calderon mentioned similar rules earlier. Don't touch others' women. Don't steal from members. Don't exploit prostitution. Don't kill other members needlessly. Avoid police. Don't fight with members. Behave properly. Silence with outsiders. No self-introductions.
A strange mix of crime and strict rules. And the ban on writing things down.
Crucial. Too risky if police find it. That's why the rituals, the personal introductions based on trust, are so important. No paper trail.
And omerta, the code of silence. Probably the most famous rule.
Absolutely fundamental. Forbids betraying anyone to the authorities. Penalty is death, maybe even for your family, and just generally avoiding police. A mafioso wouldn't report a crime even if he was the victim.
And they impose it on others too.
Through intimidation, yeah. People who use their protection are expected to keep quiet. Makes it incredibly hard for law enforcement.
Let's get back to your protection rackets. That seems to be the core business.
It really is. Gambetta's cartel of private protection firms idea nails it. They sell security and trust where the state can't or won't provide it reliably.
Mediating disputes, overseeing dodgy deals.
Exactly. Protecting people from cheats, thieves. Like Gambetta's example of an untaxed meat deal, the mafia guarantees fairness because they can enforce it with violence if needed.
And it's not just for criminals. Shops pay too.
Yeah, regular businesses pay for protection from theft. The mafia's reputation scares off thieves, and they use their underworld contacts to recover stolen goods.
So it's a mistake to think they only protect you from themselves.
It is. Coercion is part of it, sure. But many people, especially criminals, actively seek mafia protection because it works in a way. That dependency is key to their survival. Their clients protect them from the cops.
What about the pizza, the payment?
That's the fee, can be cash, can be favors. Smaller firms often pay a bigger percentage of profits, which is tough on them, holds back the economy, creates monopolies, contributes to Sicily's poverty trap.
And theft. Do mafiosi steal?
Generally forbidden for members to steal within their own network or territory. Their job is to track other thieves, recover goods, punish them, usually beatings, often cooperate between clans on this.
They also protect from competition.
Sometimes. Threatening rivals or enforcing price-fixing deals between businesses, especially in markets like garbage collection, lots of competitors, easy to enter, hard to differentiate.
How do they approach businesses initially? Friendly.
Can be aggressive, but yeah, often surprisingly friendly at first, like salesmen. Offer favors. If you refuse, then maybe vandalism, harassment, physical assault just for saying no is less common initially. They want long-term friends, stable income.
And mafiosis often don't own the businesses they protect.
Right. They often divest to avoid conflicts of interest, makes them seem more like impartial protectors, arbitrators, builds trust.
And the territories, they fight over those.
Clans negotiate territories to have a monopoly on violence there, ensures their protection is reliable, avoids bloody turf wars between racketeers, but disputes over those boundaries. That's the main cause of mafia wars. And the monopoly means high prices, maybe lousy service for the clients.
A complex, dark ecosystem. What else are they into, besides protection?
Vote buying is huge, always has been. Politicians need the votes mafiosi can deliver from clients, relatives, associates. Maybe 40-50 votes per man of honor?
And in return.
Favors. Sabotaging investigations, steering contracts their way. Mafiosi aren't usually ideological. They back whoever they think will help them most, often centrists.
Ugly.
They often finance and protect smuggling gangs, provide the trust, the security. They don't usually do the smuggling themselves unless it's super high risk, like heroin. Then maybe the smugglers get inducted.
Bid rigging. Controlling contracts.
Massive income from that. Billions, potentially. Using threats to make sure mafia-controlled companies win bids, then taking a cut the pizza again.
Loan sharking.
Big business, especially when the economy's bad and banks aren't lending. Huge percentage of Sicilian businesses owe money to loan sharks, many mafia-linked, raking in over €1 billion a year.
Are there crimes they don't do? Forbidden crimes?
Generally, yeah. Theft by members within their turf is usually a no-no, and kidnapping draws too much heat, too much public anger and police attention. The rules get broken, of course.
Interesting. Finally, let's talk violence and reputation. That seems critical.
Absolutely critical. Their power comes from their reputation for violence, especially murder. That reputation deters enemies, reassures clients, often without needing actual violence.
So the threat is as important as the act.
Often more important. A mafioso's reputation is everything. Is he a good protector or not? Failures ruin you. A fearsome reputation lets you win disputes without a fight. Even if a boss is weakened, his past reputation can carry him if people don't know he's weak.
And losing a strong boss is a big deal.
Huge. Clients might leave, power shifts. Established clans have a massive advantage because of their history, their known ruthlessness.
And the murders themselves, usually internal.
Almost always carried out by members. Outsiders are a liability. Main targets are rival mafiosi. Murder seems to have been more common in Sicily than the U.S. Mafia, probably because Sicily had more smaller families, leading to more friction.
So violence isn't random. It's a tool, a brand.
Yeah.
Wow. This has been quite the deep dive. Let's try to sum up the key takeaways for you listening.
Okay, so the Sicilian Mafia, Cosa Nostra, it's deeply rooted in Sicily's history. Social, economic, political changes all played a part.
Right. It has this unique structure, clans, commissions, a strict code of conduct, omerta.
And its main game, historically and still, is providing protection, guaranteeing trust where the state fails, all backed up by that reputation for ruthless violence.
Yeah, and that contradiction is striking, isn't it? These men of honor involved in such brutality, it really shows their own internal logic, their warped sense of honor.
Exactly. It operates by its own rules.
So here's a final thought to leave you with. This organization has constantly adapted. Feudalism's end, fascism, post-war chaos, globalization. It's always found a way.
So the question is, how will it adapt next? With technology, global crime networks, new law enforcement tools.
Could that core function, being a guarantor of trust in illegal or gray areas, find new forms, maybe online, in the digital world?
It's definitely something to think about. How does an organization built on personal bonds, territory, and physical intimidation operate in an increasingly virtual world?
A provocative question to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.